In this episode of In the Loop, we get an inside look at what it's like to answer calls for the National Mental Health Hotline.
Good afternoon, Maryland Helpline. How may I help you?
Plus, Scripps News is exploring this year's Consumer Electronics Show. From flying cars to new gadgets for the kitchen, we're highlighting some of the most interesting inventions.
It basically takes all the hassle away. You can walk away from the kitchen and it will notify you when dinner is ready.
This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. New year, new name for the network, but same old ITL for y'all. Don't worry though, we've got plenty of stories coming up for you tonight, including those. But first, we're revisiting an old story we've covered in both 2021 and 2022 that is still posing a major threat in 2023. The water supply for much of the island of Oahu and the more than 1 million people who live there is facing potentially irreparable damage after repeated leaks at the Red Hill fueling station at Pearl Harbor. The Navy base has aging infrastructure that has leaked out jet fuel and, more recently, firefighting foam containing so-called forever chemicals. A leak of 14,000 gallons of jet fuel in November of 2021 sickened dozens of families living on the Pearl Harbor base. And in November of 2022, the Navy said an estimated 1,100 gallons of AFFF firefighting foam that contains toxic levels of PFAS forever chemicals leaked out. But that wasn't the first time toxic forever chemicals had leaked at Red Hill. Later reporting revealed there had been a previously unknown firefighting foam leak in 2020. That might explain why even a year before the latest leak, testing found PFAS in the water samples. These leaks aren't just a threat to the base, they put the whole island at risk. In December, Honolulu Board of Water Supply Chief Engineer Ernie Lau spoke with us about the impacts of these leaks.
Please, you pray for us because we are far from through this problem. The journey is still in front of us, and the risk and the consequence of further leaks are enormous to our community. So please, we value your prayers.
The reason these leaks impact so many is in part because of the island's distinct water source, which provides the city of Honolulu and surrounding communities with drinking water. See, the island is surrounded by an ocean full of salt water, but it relies on fresh rain and groundwater that seeps in through the surface underground into a water-bearing rock area called an aquifer. The water stays down there for years and years until it gets pulled up by wells that work almost like a drinking straw. But as fuel and firefighting foam leak into the ground, the risk grows that it'll work its way down and pollute the aquifer. It's kind of like playing with fire. Fuel tanks are located just a few hundred feet from the well that pulls up water from the aquifer. It's the island's main source of water, and if it's polluted with potentially toxic chemicals, there aren't many other options available. The time frame is a bit different with the firefighting foam leak than the jet fuel leak. The firefighting foam could damage the water supply for generations.
I think extended the timeline that we may be dealing with this problem from not decades, maybe 50, maybe 100 years because of these forever chemicals.
And that could have some pretty wide-ranging consequences for the entire state's economy, according to environmental advocate and Hawaii Sierra Club Executive Director Wayne Tanaka.
We need water not just to drink, but for pretty much every aspect of life here in Hawaii. We have a housing crisis, but we can't build housing units without sufficient water resources. We need water for our tourism industry, for our schools and hospitals. There's pretty much everything about living here in Hawaii depends on having access to water.
Hawaii also has a large population of indigenous Hawaiians, whose culture treats the Aina, or land, like a family ancestor. It's part of what motivates activist and organizer for Oahu Water Protectors, Danny Espiritu.
Aina is considered a member of the Ohana, a family member. In many cases, it's considered a kua'ana or an elder sibling. And so our relationship to Aina is really that familial relationship where Kanaka people have a responsibility and a privilege to care for Aina, and in return, Aina feeds us.
The Pentagon has responded, with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin announcing last March that the military plans to close and defuel Red Hill. The EPA announced a proposal in December for a voluntary regulation agreement to safely close and defuel Red Hill and protect its drinking water system. But the military has a history of not following through on previous voluntary regulations. The latest leak of firefighting foam has worn away at confidence from activists and local officials. In the aftermath of that leak, Ernie Lau from the Board of Water Supply joined activists in protests in December. He told us afterward that he appreciated the Navy's work to date, but worried what else could still come between now and Red Hill's eventual closure.
This latest release of AFFF concentrate liquid really has damaged my confidence in this process. What else can happen here when they're supposedly focused on really being very careful here?
Let's get a little more here on this ongoing situation at Red Hill and the potential threat it poses to the surrounding community. Joining us now is Christina Jedra. She is an investigative reporter for the Honolulu Civil Beat. She's been covering every twist and turn in the Red Hill story for the last few years now. Christina, thank you so much for coming back on In the Loop.
Thanks for having me, Christian.
Last time we chatted was back in March when the Pentagon announced plans to close and defuel Red Hill. What has led to problems here in the meantime?
Well, the Navy is still in progress in terms of defueling Red Hill, although there's a lot yet to be done. There's still 100 million gallons of fuel sitting above our drinking water source. In the meantime, a new crisis has popped up. They've spilled an estimated 1,300 gallons of firefighting foam concentrate at the facility. And that stuff, in a lot of ways, is even worse than fuel because it's made up of forever chemicals that don't disintegrate in the environment. And they're very toxic for human health.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the leaks of AFFF, or the firefighting foam, it seems different in nature and scope from the jet fuel leaks we saw last year. In what ways, is this particular leak similar or different when it comes to the threat, posed to the water system and the people living in these communities?
Both situations are public health threats, certainly. The sort of silver lining with the fuel crisis was that fuel is actually biodegradable. There's little microbes in the environment that can eat it, and over time, it will, be subsumed by the environment. And so there was kind of that hope in terms of our aquifer when it came to the fuel. With this firefighting foam called AFFF, it really doesn't do that. They're really persistent in the environment, and they can cause a whole host of health issues, some of which are not even really well understood. Only 2 kinds of these chemicals are pretty well studied. There's thousands of other kinds. So the Navy is working on cleaning that up, but we haven't heard yet whether that cleanup is complete. And other details about previous AFFF leaks are now coming out. So there's a lot there.
What problems have popped up between state and local officials and the military in addressing these leaks?
It is a unique relationship. Like, on one hand, the state health department is a regulator of the Navy, but then there's also this dynamic that the military is a huge part of our economy here. So I think, I've heard over the years, there's a feeling that they have to tread lightly or be smart about how they kind of assert themselves when it comes to the military. But they say they're doing what they can to hold the Navy accountable for what they've done and hold them accountable for cleaning it up.
One of the things that I think is really important for our audience here is kind of looking ahead. What do things look like going forward here?
I think it's a delicate balance. On one hand, officials and community members are calling for the defueling of Red Hill quickly. We see, bumper stickers and posters in our community saying shut down Red Hill. At the same time, there's also a need to do it safely. And so officials are also saying, well, we have to do this right because we don't want to create another crisis, another fuel leak or firefighting foam leak in the process of draining this place and shutting it down.
One last thing for you. What do we know about how well the Navy will adhere to its previous timelines for defueling?
The latest we've heard is that they plan to shut the place down by summer 2024. However, if you look historically at the Navy's management of Red Hill, whenever they've gotten a deadline, they try to push it several years into the future. I don't think they'll be able to get away with that as much given the current climate, but everyone's keeping an eye on them, and I think the community plans to hold them to that date, if not push them to get it done sooner.
Christina Jedra is an investigative reporter for the Honolulu Civil Beat. Christina, thanks so much for stopping by again to update us on this story.
Thank you so much, Christian.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is a story we've been following for a while now, and we will continue to check back in and bring you updates. Okay, we're taking a break, but when we come back, an investigation into the head coach of U.S. Soccer takes a few interesting turns. We'll unpack what's been uncovered in just a few.
Newsy is now Scripps News,
And now, an investigation you'll only see here on Scripps News.
shining a light on local, national, and worldwide news.
I'm Jason Bellini in Ukraine, reporting for Scripps News.
And still available free to everyone, everywhere.
Real stories and the issues you might want to hear.
Because understanding the story is what really matters.
Newsy is now Scripps News. Go to scripsnews.com now to find out more.